All right. Good evening to all of you that are joining us live. And for those of you that are catching this stream later, welcome to you as well. I want to thank you for taking time this evening or just taking the time to be part of this very necessary conversation. As many of you know, if you have been watching the news or keeping up on your social media, whether it's on Twitter or Instagram or what have you, um, you have seen that there have been some uh, very recent, or not just very recent, but we've seen a rise over the last several years in anti-Asian hate crimes. And as you can see, we have gathered here together, fellow Asian American Pacific Islanders, to discuss this very topic. I want to tell you a little bit about how this came about. I think that over the last several weeks and months, really seeing these attacks on elderly Asians um, really struck a chord with me. It hit me pretty deep. And we've just seen these crimes over and over again. And it just seems that uh, they're not getting as much attention as they should. And of course, oftentimes, because we constitute 5 to 6% of the US population, we often get dismissed or ignored in the national narrative. Um, but as I reached out to my panelists the last several weeks and kind of connecting with them and talking to them about, hey, how are you processing everything? How are you feeling? And we've all responded collectively with anger, with pain, with hurt, even with disappointment. And I'm a pastor, and I do a lot of prayer, and I was praying to God, sitting with Him through my anger and through my pain, asking God, how can we come together and not just discuss this and bring awareness to, but how can we move forward and address this very important issue? And God said, hey, let's talk about it. Let's at least bring awareness to it. And so that's why I convened some very special panelists who are personal friends of mine and colleagues. And tonight we are going to be talking about anti-Asian hate crimes and how we as a community of faith can address this moving forward. But of course, before we get into the panel discussion, I want to introduce some of my panelists. So I'm going to go first and start off with Sam Nadarajan. Sam, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, my name's Sam Nadarajan. I'm a Atlassian consultant, currently living in the Lansing, Michigan area. Is there anything else I should be saying?
What's your background, Sam?
Oh, I am an Indian American. My parents moved here from India back in the 80s, and I was born here shortly thereafter in Maryland.
All right. Thanks, Sam. Let's go over to you, Jeremy. Introduce yourself, buddy.
Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Jeremy Wong. I'm currently pastoring in Columbus, Ohio, originally from Southern Indiana. My background is Chinese American. My parents actually immigrated here to the States, I believe, in the 70s. My dad was actually from Malaysia, and my mom was from Indonesia. But we are Chinese. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit about myself.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Let's kick it to you, Justin. Tell us about yourself.
Hey guys, my name is Justin Yang, and I'm currently here in Texas Conference serving the Young Adult Ministries as the director. We just recently relocated from Atlanta, Georgia. This is actually a deeper South for us. Atlanta, Georgia was the first South experience, but this is actually a different kind of South here. I'm actually a Korean American and have an interesting journey actually with how I came to the States when I was younger, and then I did a reversal back to Korea and then came back. So it's been quite the journey, and through it all, I believe that the core identity of me being an Asian American really has impacted me in more ways than I can ever imagine. So that's just a little bit about me.
Thanks, Justin. Bernelle, talk to us.
Hi, guys. My name is Bernelle Rivera, and I'm a proud Islander, proud Pacific Islander. I was born and raised in Guam, and Chamorro, and I grew up on Guam, and then I went to the States after I graduated from high school, and then we just went back and forth between Guam and the States, and then I actually had an opportunity to live in Korea, which was super fun, super cool, and then now I'm here with my family and my 3 kids, and just living here in California. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Bernelle. Esther, tell us about yourself.
Oh, hello. My name is Esther Chung, and I'm currently in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm working as a nurse here, and I actually was born in Troy, Michigan. It's kind of my random fun fact, but I primarily grew up in Tennessee my whole life, basically. I moved here about 4 years ago for my job here. I am a Korean American, and my parents both immigrated almost 30, if not more years ago. So I'm a very proud Korean American.
Awesome. Thanks, Esther. Samantha, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Hi, like John said, I'm Samantha. I'm from Orlando, Florida, born and raised. I'm a proud Filipino American, and my parents immigrated here, I want to say in the 90s, and I was born a couple years after. And I'm a physical therapist, and I like long walks on the beach. And that's me.
Thanks. I appreciate you throwing that beach thing in there because some of us here are landlocked. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Andy, talk to us, man.
Hey everyone, my name is Andy Lee. I'm a chaplain and a Bible teacher in the Silicon Valley in the San Francisco area, and I'm originally from New York. Was born and raised in New York. I'm Korean American. My parents immigrated to the States in the 70s. I'm the youngest of 3, and what else? Yeah, I've been all over the place. Like I grew up in New York, went to Virginia for 2 years in high school at boarding academy, went to Michigan, went to SoCal for college, and Bay Area, all over the Bay Area, and then back to Michigan. And it's just I've been immersed in so many different cultures. And I think I've gotten so lost in my identity to where I had to really, I think like being Asian American in the States has, again, like Justin was saying, like it has really impacted the way I see myself, learning who I am in relation to my Asian identity, as well as growing up in the States with that in all these environments.
Wow, I love it. I love it. Appreciate you guys sharing that. As for me, I'm also Filipino American. Parents came here. I was born in Guam, actually. That's how Bernelle and I kind of had that connection. Most people probably don't even know where Guam is. It exists. It's an island in the South Pacific. Anyway, we can educate them about that later. But I'm also a pastor, and I'm serving here in Kentucky, a place where I never thought I was going to be. But hey, God works in mysterious ways. But hey, so what I want to get into now is kind of a time of reflection, because you all know, and based on my conversations with all of you, we've shared quite a bit about how I have been feeling. And so, Justin, I want to start off with you. How did the rise or the resurgence of anti-Asian hate crimes affect you personally?
Thanks for actually starting with me. We're all nervous here, trying to wrap around our minds on how we can actually respond to this particular topic. Since I've been invested in the Atlanta area, and the most recent crime has transpired in Atlanta, Georgia, and John, you and I talked about this briefly, because one of my young adults that I used to pastor in Atlanta, she was a massage therapist, and she lived blocks away from where that incident took place, and she was just petrified, horrified, just and we exchanged some messages, but just by knowing that it could have been her, the very young adult that I was ministering to, the very young adult that I married, it just brought so much of these emotions within me that I'm still trying to actually process. And I mean, we've known for at least for 2020 of all the different kinds of crimes that were done against the elderly, especially Asian American, the older and seasoned generation, and quite a couple of the elders that were actually aggressively, or violently treated were, again, some of the young people that I pastored with their grandparents. So just seeing how much it's impacting them, and as a fellow Asian American, I think the word that I'm trying to actually look for is exasperation. Because, like, as an Asian American, as a good Asian American growing up in the United States, we're more shame-based and safe-based culture where we don't speak up publicly and dishonor other people publicly. So we kind of have to put everything deep inside, in the deep recesses of our souls, and almost just cry out like David in silence. Oh God, kill them! Like we can't actually express it out loud. We have to kind of sing worship songs inside and say, God, why? There's just so many things that are just going within you, but you can't, as an Asian American that's supposed to be model minority, you can't call that out publicly. So that's been part of my journey, just exasperated on what can be done. And for many, many times that has affected me, it's just, I quite did not know how to properly respond. And only in the recent years have I learned to speak out in a way that God would have me do. And I'll probably share about that in a little bit, but that's just a little bit of how it's affected me.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. And speaking of Atlanta, hey, Esther, you're kind of based nearby. Talk to us.
Yeah, basically ditto to everything Justin has said, but going through 2020 and hearing about these hate crimes, even if it was in the US, it just never felt that close to home because it was always somewhere else. And then whenever this incident occurred, first of all, I was at work and working night shift. I had to compartmentalize. I couldn't process it at work. So whenever I came home and I reread it and processed exactly what happened, I just burst into tears because it was literally just 20 minutes away from me. And as the details of the incident started to come out, like the age and the gender and the ethnicity of the victims, I mean, how could you not imagine it being your own mom or your grandma or any of your other family members, and even myself? And so just because this happened so close to home, I will say that I am slightly, if not paranoid every time I go out now. Even in public, just thinking, always having in the back of my mind, it's something gonna happen today. Am I gonna be the next victim? As somber as that may be, it's kind of a reality now. And so it's just, I think that's been the hardest part, personalizing it too much and knowing that these could have been any of my family members. So that's been very, very rough.
Yeah. Wow. Sam, talk to us. Nadarajan. Sam.
In the past, I mean, in the past, I've always tried to find a way through these situations where I could adjust. Piggybacking off of what Justin said, you're kind of forced to absorb your feelings to put on that model citizen example. So, in situations that have happened in the past, it's been more like, okay, what are some tangible steps I can take to reduce my chances of being in the line of fire, so to speak. With the most recent happenings, I just feel like we're at a dead end. I mean, you're at a salon. I mean, it's as much an innocent place as anywhere else you could go. You know, like a grocery store or something. It's the kind of place you go to relax, to unwind, to de-stress, and before you know it, that's the last place you're ever going to be. And it's like, how do you find a way to protect yourself from doing something so simple as having a little bit of self-care, especially given the year that we've had. In the past, when I've seen or read things on the news, I've typically been the one to adjust my behavior. If tensions are high with, like, in the Middle East or something, like, I will not grow a beard, because when I've grown a beard, I get a certain kind of remark that I'm not too fond of. In addition to a number of other things. But it's just one of those things where, like, okay, like, for other people, a simple choice like that would be a matter of how you want to look a certain day. But for me, it's a matter of, will I be mistaken for, someone? And then for me, it's a matter of life or death, right? Or other things. Like, I remember in the past, something that hit me really hard was seeing like I think it was an Indian American, I can't remember, but someone was pushed onto the subway right before the subway tracks came, and they died. And the person that did the pushing thought that this individual was a terrorist or a Muslim and needed to be kicked out. And it's just scary to think you're there on your commute to go home or go to work, and it's a routine that you follow every day. And now if I find myself near the train tracks or taking a train or some rail line, I will not go anywhere near the platform. I will position myself in a way where, nobody can push me over. So those are some steps I've taken in the past to protect myself. Now, whether or not I should be doing that is a completely different story. I don't think I should, right? Like, pretty much 99% of everybody else. But, for the situation at hand, and with the rise in crime, it's just like, how do you maneuver through this situation? It just feels like a dead end, and it feels like a lot of what we're seeing is coming from casual remarks that maybe some people may view as a joke, but other people are taking action on those jokes, and as a result, lives are being lost and people are being endangered, and it feels like a dead end. I think I'm past the point of sadness. I'm more to the point of anger and frustration.
Yeah. Bernelle, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think all of the sentiments, that you guys have shared have also been, things that I've thought about also. Like, it's so terrible that we live in 2021 and these things are still happening in the developed world, where we are so educated and we're so, aware of things. But in the end, things like this still happen, and it's terrible. It's also more terrible personally, I think, for all of us, that it's so close to home, because we have that cultural connection to these people, whether, we, realize it or not, we do have that cultural connection. And, like, thinking about culture and, like, the people that were targeted, like the elderly, one of the things that it made me think about was just the value that we as an Asian and Islander community place on our elders. Like, we place such a high regard for our elders, which I think is distinctly different than how maybe other cultures, place significance on their elders. And so just thinking about how terrible it is for someone to attack our elders, who are like the gatekeepers of our culture, who are the ones that we go to for advice, who are really a valued member of our, even our immediate nuclear family. And just to think about that significance, like, it's just a terrible thing. And it's something that I've been wrestling with a lot recently. Yeah, just how terrible it is for the elderly to be attacked in these particular instances that we have, seen recently in the news. And like, in a sense, it's, I don't know, kind of, to me, like an attack on our culture as well as a whole, for me, just some things that I was thinking through. So.
Yeah. Thanks, Bernelle. Hey, Samantha, why don't you share your thoughts?
No, honestly, when I first heard the news of what happened in Atlanta, it was like a mixture of feelings. I couldn't really process it because, like Esther, I heard it while I was at work, so I had to wait until I got home and just kind of had this modge podge of feelings. Like, I felt sadness, I felt angry, I felt paranoid because that could have been my mom, that could have been my grandma. And, I still live with my parents and my grandparents, so it's really hitting close to home because I go to the grocery store with them. I go to get my hair cut with them, and it made me more paranoid for my safety, especially when I'm at work, and then their safety too when they're not with me. Like, I feel this sense of like, I need to protect them, because they've done so much for me. They're my family. And something else too that I never really thought of until all these hate crimes started popping up is, what if people hear me and my family talking in Tagalog or talking in Filipino? What if they see that and they immediately put a target on our backs saying, hey, you don't belong here, get out of here. So it made me scared to even like talk to my family in our own language in a place where we live. And it's just that feeling of being hurt and not welcome in a place where we should feel welcome. So honestly, I think I'm still kind of processing through it, especially, with my family as well.
Yeah, I think we all can agree we're all processing. Andy, how are you processing, man?
Yes, so I mean, like, I think a lot of things I resonate with what you all are mentioning, feelings of anger, frustration, sadness. I think like because I've been so busy, at teaching and at work when this was happening, and then spring break happened, and John, that's when you and I messaged, and I kind of just had a moment where I was just being honest with you, and I think the moment you asked me how I was doing, I was on spring break, and I had some downtime, and I remember just allowing myself to process, and immediately, I started to cry, right? And like it's just the fear of the ones you value the most in your life, the elderly, like the ones who sacrifice so much for you, and who are the most harmless, and that they can be attacked in the most ordinary moments of their day. Like it's just everything about it is so angering and frustrating. And then like adding to it is like it's happening in these areas in our country where Asians should feel safe.
Right.
In Chinatown, right? In Oakland, San Francisco, in Flushing, Queens, New York, where my dad works. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, these are not like I'm shocked, right? Like it's happening, and it's happening everywhere, right? Like it's not, but you see a lot of the cases in these areas as well, and so you could see the anger uprising amongst a lot of young adult Asians. Like we're all like, oh no, you did not just mess with my grandma or my parent, right? Like, and it's like you mess with the wrong people, right? And I think like there is this sense of like, how do I be a good Asian Christian amidst all this while I'm so angry? And it's like, so I can't really see clearly, right? Like, but I think this conversation is kind of helping me process some of that, knowing that I'm not alone in these feelings, and then seeing beyond that. And I think like I'm kind of I teach teenagers, and I have a lot of AAPI students, and I have like other friends who are in ministry in this area. One of them who created a platform, like a ministry to talk about social justice issues like this. And she asked me, like, Andy, like, you need to inform me, tell me what we can do to help, right? And so I'm like, let me get past some of this anger and talk to some of my Asian friends and see where we can go from here and how I can involve, other people from other, ethnic backgrounds in the church and whatnot. And so yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at with some of this stuff and trying to process and trying to raise awareness, as an educator so that it can lead to something, right?
Yeah. Wow. Powerful. Thanks, Andy. Jeremy, talk to us, man.
Well, I resonate with, what everyone has shared. I first heard about it actually the day after it happened. I had a busy morning, so I was coming back from Bible study. Didn't have much time to, check social media and stuff. I actually read Justin's post on Facebook, and that actually was what led me to, what happened. And my immediate gut reaction was, frustration, anger. I was upset. I remember driving home, and when I got home, I sat in my living room and I just started to cry. My wife was sitting there on the couch, and I just started to cry. And it was mixture of not knowing what to do, mixture of anger, frustration, all those emotions that have been shared. And on top of that, figuring out how to process this as an Asian American. I was, in my own mind too, I was trying to process this. Okay, what do I say as a faith leader? As a youth pastor, I have teenagers and young adults who look up to me. And what do I say as a faith leader? And, about 90% of my youth group are African Americans. And so when things got bad last summer, I was there to process things with them. I was there to have those conversations with them. But when this stuff happened, it was really personal. And as I was processing this, trying to figure out, what I say as a faith leader, but also feeling like, who's going to be that pastoral presence to me? Because I needed that at that time. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now, still processing, still figuring out, what does this look like? What does this look like as an Asian American? What does this look like, as a leader of a faith community? What is this all going to look like? And, part of me feels bad because, I feel that, we're complaining about things and things like that. And so dealing with all that emotion and stuff like that. That's kind of where I'm at. Sorry for getting emotional, but
No, man, you're good.
No need to apologize, man.
I think your rawness right now, Jeremy, with us here in the panel and sharing your feelings, is something that we need at this time, because like you shared, you are still processing this and you wish that you had someone like a pastoral mentor to help you process this information. And I think, us being real and raw with our emotions right now is really going to help us to connect with other people so that we can band together and support each other through this terrible period, in our history. And so I think this is a great start for helping others to process the things that we have been going through. Which is beautiful.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that. And I was fortunate enough that the lead pastor that I work with, came up to me that weekend and talked with me, and he said, if any of that stuff is happening in our church, you let me know, because there's no room for that stuff in our church. And so just to have him say that, was huge to me. And just different other members, a head elder came up to me and she said something, and some other church members. So I've been, fortunate to have people, come around and show support, um, which has been very helpful, and I'm very appreciative of. Um, but on the same hand, on the flip side, having someone to be able to process this with, that understands where I'm coming from, because they've experienced the same thing. I think is something that I need at this time, and so something like this is very helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I resonate a lot with what you all said, and like you, Jeremy, I'm a faith leader. There aren't a lot of people of our ethnicity where I work. I'm in the middle of Kentucky, and like you, I think I struggled not just with the anger. Um, I also struggled with that isolation, that I didn't have really anybody that I could, say, "Hey, man, let's go get to lunch and let's talk about our experience." And of course, I'm grateful that my church community embraced me and has supported me, but they don't understand. And I also have wrestled with disappointment and anger at some of the response that I received when I did speak out about this issue. Oftentimes dismissed. Oftentimes I was told to put up and shut up. I was told to get over it. Essentially, stop. Trying to get into the oppression Olympics, like it's like we're trying to see who's more oppressed or anything. And I'm just it took a long time for me to even get to this point where I'm just not angry. I mean, like, I'm still angry, but I think I'm processing it, at least in a healthier way. And I think part of that process, Jeremy, is being real and raw with our stories. And I kind of want to go into that now, what our stories of our personal stories of how we've experienced racism growing up here in the States. And I know this is going to be a personal question, and if you're not comfortable answering this, you don't have to. But have you experienced racism, and did you speak up about it? Why or why not? So Sam, you kind of alluded to this earlier, so I want to start with you, buddy. Have you experienced racism, and did you speak out about it? Why or why not?
Yeah, so that's a pretty loaded question. It's hard, at least from my perspective and my background, to definitively say that yes, this was a racist remark that was made against me. It's hard to sometimes prove the subjectivity of it, only because it's in many situations it comes across as like, my word versus your word, right? And where does that go? Had a couple of instances. I know I've mentioned, with external situations, I've adjusted my behavior. I've been very fortunate in the sense that if I have experienced it, I wasn't aware of it at the moment. I know that there have been times where I remember one time I was biking home from church. I went through college without having a car, so two wheels was my way to get around. And it was one Sabbath afternoon, sunny day, and I was on my way home. I was biking along a road that bikers typically bike on, even though there wasn't much of a shoulder. And I just remembered there was this truck that came by. I was about 5 miles away from college, and they came by and they started throwing rocks at me while I was on my bike. And I was terrified. I was petrified in the moment, because I'm on a bike and they're in a truck, and they were throwing rocks at me and they started cursing, "Get off the road, you effer," or whatever. And I was so scared. because, you know, whether I was in the wrong or in the right, I mean, I had a legal right to be on the road, but when it's between a car and a bike, it doesn't matter who's in the right, right? It's a life or death situation there. So that was probably my closest encounter with something that I could definitively say was racist. Especially knowing that that is a road that other people are on, and you know, it's not like the car was being blocked by oncoming traffic, so it wasn't an issue to go around. And I've experienced similar situations up here in Michigan, in that respect. But it's tough because when it happens in the moment, the first thing I'm thinking of is not, is this racist or not? The first thought that comes to mind is, am I going to survive? And if so, how many limbs am I going to keep as I exit this situation, right? And it happens so fast, it happens so quickly that, you know, there's so many things going on in your head that by the time you do sit down to process it later, you're exhausted, the moment has passed. It's, and unfortunately the situation was fleeting, that had I had an opportunity to speak up in the moment, I wouldn't have been prepared to speak up in the moment. So I mean, in situations like that, no, unfortunately, I wish I could have spoken up, but I didn't. And that's partly due to processing, partly due to that approach of trying not to make a ruckus. You're trying to make it out alive, which, you know, doesn't really help the community as a whole, right? By trying to absorb it all. I think my mom had a pretty explicit racist encounter. We had moved across the country from Maryland, and in Maryland was where my parents emigrated to, and she was looking for a job as a nurse, and she applied across the country, found a job in Oregon. So we drove across the country to Oregon, the state that no one on the East Coast seems to know that exists, but God led us there. And we were grateful to get solid footing, right? And you know, she was there for I think a year or so, and this was in the mid 90s, like 1996, 97. And you know, Oregon's known as a pretty progressive state in a number of things. So it was definitely very shocking when my mom left her job at the hospital. Well, she didn't actually leave. She was asked to leave because when she was treating patients, there was one patient that specifically said, "I don't want that colored person or that Indian person treating me." And that was really tough. And I was only like 6 or 7 years old at the time, so I didn't understand the brevity of the situation then. But I do remember what happened afterward. My mom needed a job so she could support 4 of us kids. So she moved back to Maryland to get a job back there, and we grew up in a divided home as a result. And not that I want to pin all the blame on our upbringing on that one patient that made that remark, but you know, it definitely affected us. And you know, I know that my mom had options to sue the hospital or to, you know, pursue legal action, but at the time, you know, we were all still pretty new. We were still trying to find our footing. There were other more pressing concerns we needed to worry about. But thinking about stuff like that, it's just, it makes me angry to think, you know, what could have been if this hadn't happened? Could things have been better? And I know that, you know, my experiences growing up and, you know, seeing what I've seen is only a small portion of what millions of other people are experiencing that haven't vocalized or shared what they've gone through. And that part definitely scares me, just how much more prevalent it is out there that we don't even see surface in the news cycle at all, but is a very hard reality and the day-to-day experience of many people. So that's been tough.
Oh man, thanks for sharing, Samantha.
Trying to think. I feel like I've only experienced probably like those microaggressions, probably like those casual jokes that aren't really racist, but then when you think about it later on, you realize, oh, that kind of was racist. I'm trying to think. At work, probably I can only think of like one offhanded instance. I guess the patient that I was treating, she didn't realize that I was Asian, and so she was making these remarks that were pretty racist. And at the moment, I'm kind of in shock. Like, what do I do? Like, I'm trying to treat this patient one-on-one. Do I speak up about it now, or do I just keep my head down and just suck it up and go through the treatment? Luckily or unluckily, that was only like a one-time visit, so I never saw that patient again. But then when I think back on it, could I have said something different? Could I have educated her in that time that we had together? Could I have made that situation better? Could I have made it worse? It's always like those what ifs, I would say. But kind of along the lines of what Sam was saying earlier, when you're in the moment, you're trying to figure out, you have to process what's being said to you. And then the other part of it too is, if I go forward with this confrontation, or if I go forward with this conversation, am I going to come out of it with all my limbs intact? Am I going to come out of it unharmed? So I think the mindset also that I have is about surviving, which is kind of sad to say, because no one should be ever subjected to this kind of prejudice or these kinds of situations. And I think having this conversation, really putting it out there and letting people know that you're not alone, I think that's one of the first steps into bringing this to light and figuring out how to move forward from here.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam. Andy?
Yeah, as I'm hearing, Sam and Samantha share, and I think like Samantha, I look back at my experience and I feel like I had a lot of microaggression experiences, and and like Sam, I can't really identify specific moments where I can like remember, right? But I feel like I went through a lifetime of repression, and it's really affected me in the sense of making me confused. I think I denied my Korean identity throughout my teenage years because I was ashamed of it, because I felt like that was the reason why people didn't accept me or like me, or I was different, right? And I was just in this constant denial of a part of me. And of course, as I got older and start to really want to know who I was, that's when I kind of like tried to embrace that part of me a little bit more, right? And understand my culture. And but I think just like growing up in New York, and I feel like I remember in high school when I went to public school for the first time, the school I went to was predominantly Black, and I think I just kind of like tried to be invisible in that scenario because everyone was bigger than me. And like I was like this scrawny Asian dude who liked to break dance, and I was in band and what I played tennis and whatnot, right? And then but like I just it was a whole new environment. And I think that like while I kind of went through that part of my those years without having experiencing something really like really racist, like where I would get hurt or anything like that, and I get beat up or bullied real bad or anything like that. It's I think like the fact that I felt like I had to just kind of be quiet or just kind of make my way through it without causing any causing any disruptance or anything like that. I think that affected me, right? And then I went to like boarding school for like 2 years in Virginia, where it's really white, and like I don't think anyone there really like knew many Asian Americans. Like they had international students, and then I came and like I was like the only Korean American person they knew, and I'm telling them like I was born here. Like and they had Korean international students and thought I was one of them, and I'm like, bro, like it's different.
I'm not a fob.
Yeah, I'm not a fob, and and like just going through that right throughout my teenage years, and constantly taking on light comments from people who had no bad intention, right? Like, but you just kind of suck it up and take it because these people don't mean harm. But I think like over the, again, like we're in 2021 and the sensitivity levels are so high now with like this kind of stuff. Teens these days, right? Like super sensitive about everything. And so I think like while I've gone through a lot of microaggressions and like moments here and there where I've experienced like comments that may have come off racist and whatnot, and maybe I've said nothing, right? Like a lot of times, I think now as a teacher, I'm a lot more vocal when I see other people say things to each other. And so like if I see students saying things that may sound racist, I think those are the moments where I'm like, okay, I need to point that out. Like these are, because it's like I think back of all the times where I didn't say anything in my life and no one said anything for me. Like and like no one stood up for me. So it's like I got to be that person or try to be that person for other people. And that's like, for me, that's like how do I encourage that? Right, is like we need to be eyes, right? We need to be eyes for people wherever we go, even in our communities, right? Like and so yeah, that's a little bit about my experience.
Yeah, I think that several of us tried to learn how to break dance too, but that's a conversation.
Still
I
learning.
do some of that, but not as probably as good as you. But hey, I saw Esther, you were nodding your head in agreement. So I wanna go to you. Tell us a little bit about your experience.
Oh, you calling me? Okay. Well, I want to also just piggyback off of everyone. I think microaggressions were very, very real. So after my parents, after I was born in Michigan, we moved to Collegedale, and I grew up a couple of years, like I don't remember much, but we were in a very, very tight-knit Korean community. But my dad was working in like 2 hours away in another city. So my mom thought it'd be very important for us to be close to him. So we ended up moving to this very small town, very predominantly white community. Like I looked up on Wikipedia to see the demographics. It's like 1% Asian. I'm pretty sure we were that 1% Asian in that town. So my formative years were definitely, I was in this white town. And so where the microaggressions come in, it's like, oh, your English is very good. And in my mind, I'm like, bruh, I was born here, but thank you. Or like, I think there's a term in the Asian community, it's like our lunchbox moments, where we take certain snacks, certain fruits, certain something foreign that like smells, looks different. So intriguing to everyone, and it just like permeates the room every time you open it. It's like, so I just remember like after those instances, I begged my mom to be able to buy school lunches. I was so excited back then. I mean, I would do anything now if my mom took pack me lunches. But I remember back then I was like super excited and just wanting to just hide that part of me. And we all talked about like survival and stuff. And I think just the survival of wanting to be accepted, especially that no one looked like me. So that was very real. And I remember growing up, like I hated my mom's name, Chung. No one could get it right. Or it would always be followed by like Ching Chong or just like really demeaning comments. And of course, when you're little, it's so much easier to laugh it off. I mean, like in our culture, like we find the path of least resistance. We do the best we can to just assimilate into our community, especially just not seeing anyone that looks like me. So just stuff like that, and just growing up I guess in college is really when I started realizing this. But I don't know about you, Sam, and other females in this community or whatnot. Is just in the dating phase. Males, you might have encountered this too, but this phrase, always a huge turnoff. Never said it in my face, but always around me. It's like, oh, he has a thing for Asians.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah,
thanks, but like,
that's the thing.
and it's never in a negative, like they never mean it to sound very racist, but it's always like, oh, he's super tall, he's super nice, he loves Jesus. Oh, and he has a thing for Asians. That just like cancels out everything you said to me. And I think this term and this phrase applies to like every person of color. Like honestly, like it's not just Asians. I feel like it's Black people, like Latinx communities, Indigenous people, like X, Y, and Z. Like so, if you take that away, it's like, oh, if he wasn't interested in Asians, or if I were not an Asian, like would I not have any other qualified reason? Like it's such a demeaning comment, and you just get super insecure. So just laying it all out there. But yeah, just reiterating everything everyone said. It's like the microaggressions definitely. As you like posed the questions a couple days ago, at first I'm like, oh, like this is gonna be hard. Like I don't have anything. But as I was writing, it just started flowing out of me. I was like, whoa, this was the place I need to like visit, and this is very healthy and very therapeutic. I'm not gonna lie. It was like just getting it all out there and very cathartic. And so I really appreciate you just being my unofficial therapy session.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Definitely. Jay, talk to us, man.
Yeah. Well, I definitely resonate with what everyone said about the microaggressions. And it's funny because at the time you don't think much about it, but when you start thinking back, you're like, oh yeah, that wasn't cool what they said, or oh yeah, that was pretty racist. But at least in my experience, one thing sticks out. One instance sticks out to me. I was a senior at Southern, Theo major, about to graduate. And yes, and I was talking to a former conference president. He was a Caucasian man, and this was someone that I respected. This is someone that I thought, was he's been in the church, a previous conference president. I said, hey, this is a guy that I need to talk to you about. What are tips of the what are some tips to get picked up by conference? What are some tips to get hired and things like that? So I was talking to him, and he was giving me some stuff, and then he ended the conversation with, oh yeah, and I would get bigger glasses because your eyes are too small. And at that time I just I was like, okay, I just brushed it off. But as I started thinking about it, I was like, hold up, that was racist what he was saying. What do you mean I need to get bigger glasses? Too small. But anyways, I never really thought, and I never really realized how much that comment affected me. But even to this day in my ministry, I do some Sabbath school videos for the North American Division youth team. And even to this day, when I'm shooting those videos, my first thing I look at is, okay, are my eyes big enough where people can see my eyes? Or I'm saying, oh, I need to reshoot that because my eyes are too slanted. It's almost comical, and I'm like, why should I be thinking about that? That has nothing to do with the content that I'm presenting. There's nothing to do with my relationship with Jesus. It has nothing to do with that. But yet it's something that I'm worried about. Yeah, so I didn't really realize that it was affecting me even to this day. The comment that was made, and this was about 11 years ago. that this comment was made. And why I didn't speak up when it happened. Well, again, it's that Asian thing. Respect your elders. He was an elder. He was a former conference president. I was this young whippersnapper, not even out of college yet. Who was I to challenge and to say something to a more spiritually mature person who is farther along in life and farther along in his ministry career? So that's why I didn't speak up at the time. And on top of that, if you're big into the personality stuff, I am definitely a Enneagram 9 through and through. So for those who do not know what that means, I am a peacemaker through and through, almost to a fault. And so I'd rather keep the peace than to cause any waves. And that's just my personality. I'm working on that because as a pastor, sometimes you need to create waves. Sometimes you need to address things. And so God is working on that with me. But my knee-jerk reaction is, just accept it because I'd rather keep peace than to create waves.
Yeah. Wow. Bernelle, talk to us.
Oh man, as I'm sitting here like trying to figure out what I'm going to say to answer this question. Like it goes back to Sam, like, who shared, like, it's a really loaded question, it's loaded. There's so many things. We could go on and on and on, I think between all of us on just all the things that have happened. And one of the things that sticks out in my mind, actually happened at Southern as well. And to kind of like flip the conversation a little bit, I was taking an English class and I forgot who my professor was. I forgot, but I remember that he was not Asian, and he was very, very old, ancient, like, yeah, very. So, oh man, I know. When I walked in, I was like, "What is?" Yeah, he's okay. All right, he's our professor. Okay, that's wonderful. And he, being very old and being not Asian, he, shared some very old school thinking. And so what I mean is I also had a class with some international Asian girls, and this is an English class, and we're writing essays. And I remember one of the first assignments that we had was an essay. I forgot what we had to write about. I forgot, because it really didn't matter, because the thing that stuck out to me was the professor stood in front of all of us and said, all right, you guys, so your essay is due at this date. And I'm really, really wanting all of you guys to perform well, because you see these Asian girls right here? You see these Asian girls? They're going to work really hard. And they're most likely going to get the A. They're going to get the A because they work hard. So you all better, and they're international. So you guys all better, get yourself together, And I remember sitting there going, wow, like he just said that. Like, and like part of me, was like, was appalled. At first I was appalled. I was like, oh my goodness, he really just did that. But and then after that I was like yeah, like like they, Asians are really hardworking, and like we have no excuse. And for those of us who've grown up speaking English, and then thinking about that though, like afterwards, like even years afterwards, I'm like, man, like that's a lot of pressure, for these girls. Not only were they spotlighted, like, hey, they're here, but also they had pressure put upon them because of where they came from. Not necessarily because, like Esther was saying, like not necessarily because of their personality or their resume or their transcript or whatever, but simply because they're Asian, and I didn't stand up to it, and I probably should have, you know, but at the same time, like all of you guys, you know, trying to be the peacemaker, and just, you know, we're so ingrained in our culture to just not, you know, don't rock the boat, don't mention it, you know. So I didn't. So yeah.
Sorry, I just want to like comment off of Bernelle. It's funny, like the opposite can happen. It's like even if so I am just average at math. I have to study hard to really pass my classes. I am not naturally gifted. I'm just throwing that out there.
But you're Asian, so you have to.
No, exactly. It's like any time that I do really well, I do work hard. And granted, yes, I grew up playing an instrument, so yes, that's stereotyped. But like, whenever I perform well, it's just like sometimes you get dismissed. Like you do well, oh, because it's your Asian. It's not because you worked hard. It's like it's like a catch-22. It's like you work hard, you're Asian. You don't work hard, oh, but you're, you know, it's like you can't win.
Yeah.
So that just reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Justin, talk to us.
Oh man, so much of it has been shared already, you know. But for those that are actually watching, I want you to kind of see this. It takes a lot for the Asian community as a whole to do a uprising and express our emotions.
Yeah.
You know, John talked about the whole oppression, you know, Olympics, and we're taught to suppress our emotions. We grew up oppressing anything that would offend. It's not in our nature to offend anyone.
Right.
In the case of Jeremy, as he's expressing his anger, he has to apologize. Did you see that? Right? That's us. Like in the midst of expressing our sure frustration and anger, we have to also apologize because we don't want to offend you. So, and also we have to use humor, like self-deprecating humor, to kind of balance out what we're trying to say. This is our reality as Asian Americans, you know. And this is the latest statistic I heard from Dave Gibbons, who is a pastor over in Southeastern California. And he talked about how between the 70s and 90s, there were about 5,000 lynchings for the Black Americans. For the Asian American community, in just 2019 and 20 alone, we had over close to 4,000 hate crimes. It took a lot for us as a community to finally hit that tipping point and say, oh, you've got to stop this Asian hate. So when we're actually discussing what we're discussing right now, it's coming from a deep place of, oh man.
It's a deep well. It's a very, very.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me.
It's all right, Justin.
So let me just go ahead and relay some of the incidents that I've never voiced out. I think in the last 4 to 5 years, especially with the emergence of former administration, I was down in Atlanta, Georgia, and various gas stations all around Georgia and Texas. You know, you pull out of your car and you begin to, you know, do your thing at a gas station, and just random people just pass by, get the out of my country. Why are you still here? You know. And they would actually march up to you, and I got so scared that I had to actually go into my car, lock it, drive away without even getting gas, because of somehow in the eyes of some people in this nation, we didn't belong here. Right? This is not a long time ago. This is 4 or 5 years ago, and ever since then, up until the moment that I just recently experienced in Texas in 2020. You know, what are you doing here? You know, somehow United States has become a country where we don't belong. That's very scary for my kids. As a parent of an 80-year-old and a 3-year-old that's growing up in this nation, to have some people tell my kids that they don't belong here. You know,
They belong here, Justin. They belong here.
And I just want to mention that even through COVID, despite everybody calling coronavirus the Chinese virus, 20% of healthcare workers in this country were Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders. They're frontline workers. And as Asian Americans, we served every ethnicity possible to the best of our ability. 50% of Silicon Valley technology and enterprise is Asian American. Many people enjoy Asian restaurants, you know, dining out, getting that Chinese food, you know, even laundry services, grocery markets, whatever services we provide, it's just almost taken for granted. It's like, yeah, that's what we do, right? And we talk about microaggressions. We learn to brush things off. You know why? Because we're taught from early on to work hard and study hard. Don't let that get to you. We don't have the luxury to process emotions. Ever since young age, like right now, for me, time stopped. Time stopped. Like I don't think I've ever in my life took maybe an hour or longer to express my emotion and to listen to my fellow Asian Americans' emotions like this. We don't talk about emotions. We really don't.
We don't.
It's actually a sign of weakness to talk about it.
Yes.
That's right.
I had to actually hesitate really, really long when Jon invited me, because I was like, to go live and talk about my emotions. But you know, this is a very much needed conversation. I mean, there's just so much, but I'm just gonna just give it back to you, Jon. Thank you for creating the space and for the stories, to letting me know and letting all of us know that we're not alone. Yeah.
And that's the thing. Oftentimes, because we don't constitute a majority of this country, we're often dismissed because of our desire and even our culture to put up with a lot of stuff to get along. We don't often have our stories out there. And just reading some of these comments on Facebook and YouTube, people are very appreciative of us sharing our stories. But I can tell you that, you know, growing up here in this country, for me, you know, I would say that I had a good upbringing. But like many of you, I've experienced micro and overt aggression. I remember growing up with people straight up telling me that, you know, go back to your country. And I was confused because, like, wait, I grew up here. I've had girls tell me, I will never date you because you're Asian. I remember I love basketball. It's my favorite sport, but I would always either get picked last or not picked at all because of my ethnicity. They'd be like, who wants to pick up the Chinese kid?
Preach, Jon, preach.
And that's just because we're seen as, you know, just, hey, you know, you're just smart. That's essentially it. Oh, by the way, Esther, Bernelle, I'm not good at math either. So I destroyed that stereotype for us here. But, you know, moving forward in my pursuit, I actually was supposed to be a doctor, but sorry, Dad, I became a pastor. Blame God for that one. But I remember in seminary, not that long ago, in my preaching class, one of my professors, he would always, you know, he would, you know, kind of do a one-on-one with us after our sermon. And I remember this one professor said, you know what, Jon, I have a lot of foreigners in my class, but I'm going to thank you because you speak English very well.
Oh my God.
Like, what? Of course. I grew up here. And I remember as I was about to finish my seminary journey, I remember overhearing some people say that, hey, there are churches that really want, white pastors that preach well. And I'm just like, so what does that mean for the rest of us? And in my first church that I pastored, there was a passing comment where someone expressed, I guess we're not going to have a white pastor. I'm just like, why would you say something like that? And so, like many of you, and for those of you that are watching and engaging with us on the chat, it is difficult for us to express these stories. It's very difficult for us to share our emotions because we do respect our elders. We realize that there aren't many of us. There's no one there to stand up for us. And I think that's probably my greatest frustration, my own journey, not speaking up, because who's going to back me up? Who's going to be there for me? And no matter how many degrees that I get, no matter how well I speak English, no matter what I do, every time people meet me, it seems that it's always, you don't belong. Where are you really from? What kind of question is that? I'm sure every one of us on this panel has experience. Hey, where are you from? Oh, I grew up, in this state. No, where are you really from? When you say those things to us, you're telling us we don't belong. You're telling us we're not seen as American. You can hear my English, but you look at my skin color, you look at my eyes, and you tell me that I'm not one of you. And so I hope that this discussion has really helped all of us here as panelists, but helped those of you that are watching this either live or watching this later on, that first of all, we all don't look alike, by the way. But we all have a collective experience as
John,
Asian Americans growing up here. We've all struggled with these microaggressions, with all these things, and we put up with this for so long. And we've struggled to find a voice, a collective voice, even in the church. As far to my knowledge, this is the only public forum that I have seen that's even talking about this. And my question is, why? Why don't we talk about these things? And so I know we're over the hour. I know that we said we were going to only do an hour, but I just want to toss this question out as we close our time together. How do we move forward? What are ways that we as AAPIs can move forward, and how can we as a community of faith, what can we do to address these problems? So whoever wants to speak up, you're more than welcome to speak up now.
I mean, I feel like just doing this, but especially, I guess, living in a very white world, we always have to wait for the white voice to validate our fears and our experiences. I think it's even crucial to have like the white evangelical church to really acknowledge, because even if we don't even acknowledge that there's a problem, we can't even, acknowledging that we have this level of racism in our community, in our churches. Like, clearly you've all shared, like, just because we're in a church, I feel like that's like almost a blanket of just like covers us, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So also, like, I feel like even if leaders of faith do acknowledge it, but just not providing this like blanket phrase of almost gaslighting us, like but God is so much bigger than racism. Or this is such a crucial time that we all get together as brothers and sisters in Christ, which are all very true statements, but it's like diminishing that we like individually exist. And so, like, I know that we're supposed to tackle racism as a whole, but like we've clearly shared, like the Asian community, the Black community, Latinx, Indigenous, like we all face racism, but everyone has such a different experience. And we have to be able to identify and call out each of those problems. and let people know that every one of their experiences is like equally valid. Like you said, we're not in this race to see who's the most oppressed. We're all trying to fight this this big monster of racism. And I just know, like, personally, I had a person close in my circle, like, with everything going on last year, we were just talking about like social and racial issues, and I just kind of brought it up, and this person said, like, I try to not, I feel like choosing a side would potentially hinder my ministry if I speak out. Like, that's why I don't get involved in issues like this. And in my mind, my heart just sank. I was like, you're a leader of faith, and I can guarantee you that, like, by you staying silent, especially if you have people of color in your congregation, you're not speaking out, will hinder your ministry even more, because silent is being complicit, and being silent means that I'm invisible to you.
Yes.
And that kind of silence is very deafening.
Anyone else want to share some thoughts on how we can move forward from here?
I think part of it too is trying to normalize this type of conversation, or at least like having these conversations. I forgot who said it earlier, but who said it earlier? I forgot who, but someone said that, you know, it's getting out of your comfort zone to talk about these things. And, you know, if you don't get it out in the open, if you don't find a way to, what's the word? Really process through all of these situations and really find a way to work through it. If you just keep it in, I mean, that doesn't really do anybody any good. And it's interesting with all of our panelists, we have different circles of influences, whether you're a pastor, whether you're a nurse or a teacher, you know, you encounter so many people and you have so many circles. And if we each do our part and initiate that conversation and make it like a normal part of every day, imagine how much of those ripple effects we can share to other people, especially with I think was it Andy? You said you're a pastor with like your youth, with a youth group, or someone is a pastor with a youth group.
Jeremy.
Jeremy. Yeah, Jeremy. Oh, Jeremy. Okay, hi, Jeremy. But really, a teacher and pastor. Okay. But really influencing the next generation, because those are the ones that are coming in the future. Those are the ones that will be, you know, growing up in this type of environment. So if we can find a way to normalize having these conversations and finding a safe space for expressing these concerns, I think it's a good way for us to move forward in the future.
Well said. Well said.
I was listening to like a Brene Brown podcast before, and she was interviewing Emmanuel Acho, and he said something really interesting. He said like proximity creates care, and distance produces fear. And I think even with the, you know, with the Black experience and with our experience, I think when we're hurt, like there's a tendency to just go to our people and to stay close to those who we know we can trust. And, you know, and we need that, you know, the Asian community tends to you know, we're a very communal culture. So we do stay together. We're strong. And I think throughout my life, I've been trying to, I guess, create proximity with non-Asians. And because I wanted to feel accepted, not just by Asians at one point in my life, by everybody. Right. And we all can resonate with that. And I think I tried so hard, right? Like, and now it's just to a point where it's become like my life purpose to be a bridge to different people. Like, it's just one of my purposes in life, and to use my gifts in that way. And I think like, you know, sharing, I guess, in all of our circles of influences, you know, we all have friends who are not Asian, and we just really have to just have these conversations and like confront, like not confront, but just bring up tough questions because, and you know, our friends may even say things that come off racist, and we're like, dude, you know, like, do you know that sounds kind of racist? And that even itself is kind of like, it's hard to do that with your close friends, but those are the kind of things we need to do now. I mean, because like people are dying, you know, and from these ways of thinking. And some people, some like our friends like who aren't Asian may think lightly and don't have any ill intention, but then there's someone else who may think the exact same thing but has negative intent with it. And so it just has, that kind of thinking just has to be done away with, right? And yeah, like whatever circles of influence we have, whatever platforms we can create to I guess encourage these ideals that, you know, even through the whole like when the whole Black Lives Matter thing was happening, like we are encouraging the similar ideals, right? It's just a different people is suffering now, and those people need to be attended to now at this time, right? And I think Justin was spitting out some really good facts about how it takes a lot for Asians to speak out. Like we don't speak out on these type of things, but it is hit a very personal nerve, and I think a lot of our friends maybe don't know how to move forward on helping the Asian community, and so a lot of us kind of have to be those people to be like, well, we need a we want our stories to feel heard, because that's what's going to help people see our humanity. And that's what's being lost, right? Is our humanity. And when people are dying because of their ethnicity. And so it's, you know, we have a lot more in common than different when we hear each other's stories. And I think that needs to happen more.
Yep. Piggybacking off of what everyone has said, for me personally, it's definitely going to be a cultural shift to, you know, break out of the submissive, don't rock the boat upbringing that has been cemented in my psyche during my formative years, right? You know, at this point, I know we've all talked about this. It's a matter of life and death, right? Where, you know, the innocence of jokes, you know, it just doesn't stop there. So I know that's something that I need to work on, and in situations where I am in a position where I can't speak out, you know, I'm hoping and praying that, you know, God will give me the strength to speak out, not for the sake of, you know, being aggressive or belittling someone, but to, you know, draw people upward and realize that, you know, these are God's children that you're talking about, that you're dismissing. And, you know, is this something Jesus would say about, you know, his children? You know, and I know that's specific within a Christian context, but I know the question is, you know, about you know, how can we as a community of faith respond? I'm looking here at, you know, Matthew 23, and I'm realizing that, you know, Jesus is not oftentimes the sanitized leader with the seamless robe and the red sash that we have all come to grow up and believe, right? He was, in some respects, a spitfire, to put it mildly. I'm looking here in Matthew 23, and, you know, Jesus is calling out the 7 woes to the scribes and Pharisees. You know, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. You know, he's very direct in calling out people that are not advancing the kingdom of God. And he's not doing this in the privacy of his own room, putting pen to the paper. He is speaking this in public to crowds. And this is the God of the universe that's doing that. So, you know, for me, realizing that, you know, I need God to instill in me the courage that Jesus had, so that I can, by God's grace, you know, speak up for the people that are, you know, underprivileged or underrepresented. And another thing for me too, I know that this forum has been mostly in the context of, you know, AAPI, but one thing I would like to do, and I need to do more of, is, you know, stand in solidarity with other underprivileged groups, right? You know, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I don't want to say it doesn't matter. It does matter. But at the end of the day, whether you are of a particular race or orientation, or, you know, any other groups that face persecution, at the end of the day, we all share that struggle of trying to live and survive in a world where we just want to have a chance at life, right? So it's definitely going to be a community effort that spans many cultures, right? This movement has to be cross-cultural, and I think someone said earlier we need our Caucasian community that has a very large sphere of influence to stand up with us as well. And I definitely want to be a voice of solidarity to other people. And I think the other thing that we can do is we all of us are in a position where we are becoming the elders that we have grown to respect in our lives and upbringing. So as we get older, not to bring age into the question, but as we get older, and we've talked about our spheres of influence, we have an opportunity as up and coming elders to influence the next generation of people to think differently, not just from a cultural perspective, but from a Christian perspective, to say, look, this is what the kingdom of God is going to be like. We want to create the atmosphere for the kingdom of God here on earth so that it will be an easy transfer to heaven. And so I think that's something that's weighing heavily on me, especially now that I've become a father. And I know Jeremy invited me to the dad club at the beginning here, but one of the things that I want to teach my daughter and other people that I have potential influence over is to love everybody because they are them, and not for any other reason, because they are God's child, because God created them, because they are fearfully and wonderfully made. And just having that God perspective towards other people, I think, is going to make a huge difference, not just individually, but from a community standpoint, from a national standpoint, and from an international standpoint.
Sam, I just really I resonate with what everyone said. I really resonate with what you said, being a father, and being a faith leader. I think Samantha said this conversation needs to be normalized. The reason why we're so afraid to talk, the reason why we're so scared, and we were anxious before this thing even started, right? We were talking about how anxious we were. It's because it's not normalized. It's not normal to talk about these things, and we need to normalize it, not only in society, but also in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, in our faith community. And as a faith leader, as a pastor, I believe I'm in a unique situation to be able to start that ball rolling. Because these are conversations we need to have. The upcoming generation, Generation Z, is the most diverse generation that this country has ever seen. So this stuff that we're talking about is very personal to them. Very, very personal to them. And so when they see a church that is just ignoring these things, or just brushing it aside, or just saying, we're not going to talk about this at church because we're not going to create waves, or it's going to divide the church too much, and let's face on our smiles and say happy Sabbath and everything's going to be okay. When they see a church like that, no wonder they're leaving in droves. No wonder that statistics say, Barna says 6 out of 10, 60% of young people age 18, they leave church. 60%. And that's, of course, the evangelical church as a whole, but Adventism is not much better. Justin, I think you're probably more keyed into this, but Adventism is not much better. In fact, it might be even worse. And to normalize this conversation, yes, these are conversations we have to have. Yes, this is conversations that need to happen in church. We need to normalize it. And these are conversations that young people want to have. They want to know that their church loves everybody because they're made in the image of God, nothing else. And the more we talk about it, the more we normalize it, the more that message is going to come across to the next generation, but not only the next generation, come across to my son, my daughter. My daughter's 5, my son is 1.5, to their generation, that this is stuff that is normal. I love someone because God created them. That's it. Plain and simple. It doesn't matter what color, shape, size, whatever, orientation. whatever. We love them because God created them, period. And so, moving forward as a faith leader, I think, like everyone said, it's very hard for Asians to talk about this and to share our emotions. But I think it needs, like Sam was saying, a cultural shift, a mindset shift, because this cannot continue on. I do not want my son and daughter to be having this conversation 25 years from now.
That's right.
This needs to stop.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback on that, Jeremy, as Adventists, we've seen it through our history where the thing that's at our forefront is the coming of Jesus, like Jesus is coming soon. And oftentimes to a fault, where as Adventists, we are like, well, Jesus is coming. Why do we have to worry about these issues if Jesus is coming next month, or whenever he's coming? I think it's October 3/21st. Anyway, but and specifically in our Adventist community, we often get caught up with the second coming, that we don't spend time in the real issues that affect people, whether or not you're Asian or Islander or you're Hispanic or whether you're white, like really doing what Jesus did, like Sam was saying, the creator of the earth did when he was on earth, and just speaking up against those things that really matter to people. Because really at the end of the day, our mission is to share about the second coming, but what's the use of the second coming if people don't even want to be associated with us, And so, really, as Adventists, yes, Jesus is coming, but our goal is to help people to love him too by seeing our example and seeing our care for people who suffer.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, and I think that's something that's powerful for our specific Adventist.
Yeah. Sometimes we're so heavenly minded that we're no earthly good.
Right.
My God.
And say that again, Jeremy. Say that again.
Sometimes we're so heavenly minded that we're no earthly good.
Hey, let's get some amens in the chat going, guys. Hey, Justin, last word is to you, and then we're going to close here.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that just comes into my mind is, as a Seventh Adventist church together, we need to get past the infamous Happy Sabbath handshake. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
Oh, Happy Sabbath.
Can we get rid of the stand up and say hello to your neighbors part, please? Like, I feel like that's just
On any given Sabbath morning, right? You could be fighting in the car, screaming at your kids. You get out on the parking lot, you're like, Happy Sabbath. Like everything's okay. And church has become a place where we need to really hide our true self, pretend everything is okay. Like church is the one place where you should be able to be yourself fully.
Yes.
One of the saddest comments that was ever made by a young adult who left the church was, "I'm trying to Sabbath and I can't Sabbath at church."
Sad.
Like if we really have the beautiful message of the Sabbath, entering into God's rest, right? And really being a community where we are really like not only acquainted but deeply immersed in each other's story, I think everything will change. Because the first century church, like they were all up against each other. They knew each other. They served and they gave and they ate and they just did life together, right? It was everyone knew about each other, right? And I think we need to reimagine the next generation. And Jeremy, Sam, you guys all put it like so articulately. Like you articulated that. What kind of church are we creating for the next generation? And I think the church that we need to create is the church kind of like that resembles like Alcoholics Anonymous, like Racist Anonymous. Hi, my name is Justin. I'm a racist. Because sometimes I need to be humble enough to admit that I did, unbeknownst to myself, have racist mindset at times.
Yeah.
I'm not innocent. Unless we begin the journey of opening up our lives and our stories and beginning to admit humbly that we are racist and we need the saving grace of Jesus Christ. I think that's when the church comes together and just writes a beautiful story together.
Yeah.
For the record, ever since George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Armada Berry, and there's so many others, I've done the education, the redlining, the mass incarceration. There's so many things that I've been learning that really just solidified my solidarity and my brotherhood to the Black Americans, right? And this is an appeal for all the other ethnic groups out there. If you study Asian history here in the United States, whether it's the Chinese people that were used as sheep litter back in the 1800s, or Japanese who experienced almost like a mass incarceration back in the 1900s. Right. I mean, like, there's so much rich history, not rich. There's history of Asian Americans that have endured so many tragic events after another, right? And if you empathize with that story, listen to that story, and know the history, as Andy put the quote out there, enemies are only people where we don't know their story yet, right? And I think if we have that learning posture, a posture of humility, and going beyond the handshake of Happy Sabbath, I think we'll be in a much better place, where we'll be able to be a church where all generations and all races and ethnic groups begin to thrive as God's church. That's the beautiful scene in Revelation, where all nations, tribes, people, tongues, right? They all declare before the throne, worthy. I love that scene, and I pray that we can have a little bit of that heaven on earth before we actually go to heaven, and that's the goal, right? So yeah, John, take it away, man. Thank you so much for your leadership, man.
Yeah. Hey, I want to thank all of our panelists that came on. I know we were all nervous getting on here. I know for me, I was about to have a heart attack. I was like, I can't do this. I was sweating. I was about to die, but I'm glad that all of us came on together. And I want to thank you for sharing your stories. These are stories that we all need to share, to learn. But right now, our community, we're not okay. For those of you that are watching this, we are not okay. We're hurting. We're disappointed. Let us feel this moment. Let us be able to process this anger, but reach across the aisle. Extend a hand of friendship. Sit down with us. Hear our stories. We don't want to be invisible anymore. We want people to be able to acknowledge that, yes, we have struggles too. We're not all good at math, okay? We don't all look alike, and no, we don't all eat the same food, and no, there's no such thing as a language called Asian. I'm just putting it out there. And the thing about it, though, is we all need to be able to learn from one another. So I just want to encourage you all who are watching this, get to know us. We're not asking to be treated any different or treated to be special. We're just asking to be treated the same. That's all. So with that said, I'd like to close with a prayer. And hey, if you guys want to continue this discussion another time, we can certainly do that. Those of you in the comments that want to continue to engage with us, let us know in the comments, and we will see what we can do to normalize these conversations. So let's pray together. Father, I want to thank you that despite how real and raw we have been in this forum, we're glad that we have been given this space to share our stories, our grief, our anger, our disappointment. But Lord, we're grateful also that you're not going to leave us there. Lord, you've given us hope that this conversation is going to be the start of many conversations, that we are going to see change, not 20 years from now, Lord. We can see change now because of the impact that these stories that we've shared have had. So God, we pray that you continue to help us. Help us to move forward, to build bridges and break down walls. Help us, Lord, together with you until you come, Lord. Hear those voices that need to be heard. Empathize. And to love others as you would have us love. And to that, Lord, we thank you. And we thank you for this grace. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right.
Amen.
Farewell to all of you on our live stream. We will see you maybe next time. God bless you.